My job, I'm Pradeep Chibber, I teach political science, and my job here is to just say, welcome to Dr. Quraishi for coming a long way. He's here for a conference. He's going to talk today about India's elections. Tomorrow he's going to be talking about more specific things, I guess, which is how to manage elections in difficult political circumstances. I'm sure you can pepper him with questions like that. I've looked over his talk. Some of it you're familiar with, and some of the things you're going to say you should listen to, but I think he's, as you will quickly discover, he's very forthright, and feel free to ask him anything. So, Dr. Quraishi, thank you so much for coming. Just background, distinguished career as both as a scholar and as a bureaucrat, Chief Election Commissioner for many years, served with distinction and actually brought about some innovations. And rather than me steal the thunder, it's all yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be here today and to speak to you about a subject I've been dealing with for the last 6 years. As the last 2 years, I was the Chief Election Commissioner of India. Before that, for 4 years, I was one of the 3 election commissioners. It's a 3-member commission. The title of this talk came from a journalist who was invited to, who was very critical of various things that we do. And then I once invited him to see some of the activities that we engaged ourselves in. And then the pieces which he wrote really were interesting for us also. And this is the expression which he had used, that there is so much which needs to be documented, but that's not happening. These are some slides which we had, some panels which put up on our Diamond Jubilee, which we completed recently. The world's biggest election is no big deal because India has the numbers. We are the largest democracy. But it's an interesting, but not many people realize how large is this largest. In fact, we have more voters than all 50 countries of Europe put together, and all the countries of North and South America, 56 countries of North and South America put together, every continent and the entire Commonwealth. Our voters currently are about 780 million, but this presentation is based on our last general election, which was in 2009. So most of the figures are from there, but add 5%, and that will be the scale now. These are in terms of besides the voters, we have over 800,000 polling stations. It's going to be 1 million now in the next election, 2014. We conduct the entire election with the electronic voting machines, and we used about 1.2 million machines last time. 11 million people conduct the elections for us, and they're all government servants. We enroll them for election duty, we train them. Some of them are trained 2 or 3 times because zero error is all that we can afford. Therefore, they have to be fully on the job. At the moment, we have 6 national parties. There were 7, but when Lalu Prasad Yadav party got de-recognized as a national party, we lost a little in the last election. And there are 44 recognized state parties. But the number of registered parties is actually now 1,300. 1,300, but that was yesterday. And last election, over 8,000 people. They say the scale graphically given. But when we're talking of the numbers, it is more the complexities that we worry about, because we have to provide a service, as good a service as in Delhi, or it has to be the far remote island, some island which is closer to Indonesia than to Indian mainland, in the forest, at 16,000 feet in the Himalayas, everywhere. And we even have a polling station for a single voter. And we provide full service to that voter. There used to be 2 actually till last year, when in Kerala. We knew more about his activities were documented. So we knew he used to come after lunch at 2 o'clock. But our shop had to be open at 7 because that's the legal requirement. And even after he had voted, we cannot close the polling station because theoretically somebody may come later and say he was not the voter, I'm the real voter, so there will be a disputed vote. We have to keep it open till 5 o'clock. When he died last year, there was a Times of, I met somebody from Times of India just now, didn't I? Yes, so Times of India headline when he died was the death of a polling booth. Then we have single voter booth even now in Gir forest of Gujarat. It's a temple priest. Gir forest, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, is very world renowned for its lions. This temple priest refuses to go anywhere else. We have to set up a polling station. And he, of course, we achieve 100% voter turnout. You know, we have to, India is a land of diversity. All you name it, and we have it in India. Geographical, religious, ethnic, cultural, linguistic. And we have to make sure that every sensitivity is handled with consideration and care. We use all kinds of transport, all kinds of technology in the elections because some of the things are inevitable, like from elephants and camels and boats to helicopters and trains. We have to use everything. Now the credibility of election becomes particularly important in the context of our diversity, because there could be suspicion, there could be the fear that dominant people can capture elections. Then we have to ensure absolutely peaceful elections, and we must have a sound dispute resolution mechanism. There has to be transparency every stage, and we want inclusiveness of the entire society and participation. Interestingly, another undocumented thing, India was born as a republic on 26 January 1950. But Election Commission of India was born a day before Indian Republic. What was the significance which the constitution framers had in mind? We need to study that. In fact, Election Commission, there are 2-3 articles about the Constitution Election Commission. They were promulgated almost a couple of months before the Constitution itself. So then we just completed, as I mentioned, 1 year-long celebrations of the Diamond Jubilee, which was basically voter participation activities. This is a short from interesting. No, this was a very significant thing that if I don't know that you can see, you can't. President, Vice President, that's normal. The Prime Minister, the Sonia Gandhi, and the leader of opposition, Sushma Swaraj, or the major party leaders, they were all there. It's very rare they come under one roof except Parliament. But it's very, very rare they come on a same platform and speak the same language as they did, and the media commented on it very generously. The constitutional concerns were about free and fair election, and the framers of the constitution we feel were very wise people, and they debated whether the fair election should be declared a fundamental right. But after some debate, they decided to declare it a matter of fundamental importance. And probably there is no other constitution in the world which has a separate chapter on the elections as the Indian constitution has. And the constitution of this body as a fiercely independent, or is one of the gifts to India given by the framers of the constitution. The Constituent Assembly's concerns that interest of linguistic and cultural minorities should be fully protected. That was very important. The interest of linguistic and cultural minorities was so important. The debate was whether the state election should be conducted by a federal commission. Common sense is that local election should be conducted by the state government. Local means provincial. But they said that if you want free and fair electoral roll, you must have a federal commission, otherwise Bengalis will ensure that non-Bengalis are never enrolled. Madrasis will ensure that non-Tamil are never enrolled. And in their wisdom, they created this federal body, which in a way is an anachronism, but very well thought of. Article 324 vests the Election Commission with the power of managing all elections, superintendent, direction and control of all elections to Parliament, to the two houses, the two houses of State Assembly and the office of the President and Vice President of India. And whatever staff we ask for from the President or the Governor in the state, it has to be made available to us, and as I mentioned, 11 million people is what we asked for in the last election. Our own permanent staff is just 300 people. Another important feature of the election system is that courts are debarred from interfering in the election process once the election has been announced, and only after the results have been announced, courts can come in through election petition. Interestingly, in 1950, universal adult franchise was introduced from day one, while America took 144 years to give equal voting rights to women. UK, the mother of all democracies, took over 100 years. But in India, when it was given at one go, the Western world was aghast. How come a nation with 84% illiteracy, divided in caste communities and all kinds of divisions, how will they manage a democracy? But we proved everybody wrong. As I said, the courts are debarred from interfering in the election process, otherwise no election can ever take place. Occasionally, some high court here and there tries to interfere, but it takes us 30 seconds in the Supreme Court to get it reversed. It's an independent constitutional body. The Chief Election Commissioner, once appointed, cannot be removed except like a judge of the Supreme Court, which is through impeachment. And in India, no impeachment of anyone has ever taken place. There are two commissioners, and they are also provided protection, not exactly equal, but still they cannot be removed by the government except on the recommendation of the CEC. Which in my view is a flaw now, because at that time it was considered as a one-man commission. The protection was to the institution and not to an individual. Now it's a three-member commission, the same protection should be available. Because if some of you who may have followed Indian election, not very long ago, 3 years ago in my time, Mr. Palaswamy CEC recommended the removal of one of the election commissioners. It created a very ugly situation. It needs to be avoided. Fierce autonomy, as mentioned, we are not only a regulatory body, we manage the elections entirely ourselves, and during the election commission becomes very powerful because we have power. Our bureaucracy is totally unquestioned power. We can change the Chief Secretary, Home Secretary, Director General of Police, and which we have done. Not that we are trigger happy, but sometimes it becomes very important to send the signal, because as I mentioned, India is again one rare country where entire election is conducted by the bureaucracy. People wonder how come bureaucracy be neutral. Well, we feel that only bureaucracy can be neutral for two reasons. One, that in India it's a professional bureaucracy, governments come and go, bureaucracy continues. Secondly, there is a practical reason that we have the bureaucrat by the neck for the next 30 years. If somebody misbehaves, where will he go? We spoil his report, we will make sure that he will not get his promotion, his career will be spoiled. They're scared. Some of those who try to act smart and who think they can get away, they get the message when a Chief Secretary gets transferred in 5-minute notice, or the DGP is transferred, and they all down the line, they all behave. We have full control over the police and paramilitary forces, to the extent that day we announce the election, the state government has to issue a notification mentioning clearly that from the Director General of Police to the last constable, they are now on deputation to Election Commission, and they will listen to nobody but the Election Commission. We also can call in the paramilitary forces, whatever we require. This was a few 2 months ago when I was the CEC. The other two colleagues, the one on my left is Mr. Sampath, being the senior most now is the CEC. Mr. Brahma is from Assam, is the Bodo from Assam, and he is the second member. There are 7 sources of power of Election Commission of India. Constitution I've already mentioned. Then the laws made by Parliament under the Constitution and the rules made under the laws. Then Supreme Court has been our guardian angel. Through the various judgments, they have given us more power than we originally exercised, and they make sure that any attempt by the government to interfere in our affairs is thwarted with a heavy hand. Media has been a great support and ally. They are our eyes and ears, because they are watchdogs of democracy. They keep an eye on us, and together with us they keep an eye on the activities of the politicians. And if they try to act funny, they expose them, and we are able to take action under the model code and various laws. I must also give credit to political parties for making election system as strong, because they are the people who gave us the model code of conduct, which is a voluntary code of conduct, voluntary do's and don'ts for election, a very, very powerful tool that we have. It's not a law, but the compliance to model code is more than any law of the land. It's total and instant. Then bureaucracy, as I said, that they conduct the entire election with 0 error margin, because the consequences for them can be very serious. And the people of India, who have proved, despite the still pretty high illiteracy, about 20%, 25%, they are probably the smartest voters in the world. Ask any losing politician and he will confirm them. Some of the powers which came specifically from the judiciary were the power to transfer election officials. State governments would normally drag their feet. What they used to do, they'll plant their deputy commissioner, heads of the district, or the head of the police, the superintendent of police of the district, who will toe the line and who will manage their victory. So, and we keep an eye on them. We start keeping a dossier on them. And the first thing we do is to shunt out such people with the slightest suspicion. And of course, since we are getting complaints from political parties and on independent inquiry, we have to conduct a good election in 30 days. So we have no opportunity to give you a notice to prove your conduct. No, you have to, slightest suspicion, you go. After all, temporary transfer is no punishment. Now, this is an interesting sentence from a Supreme Court judgment, which gives us the omnibus power. Because somebody was questioning specific power, and then the court said nothing doing. They have whatever they want to, they can do, where the existing laws are absent, and yet a situation has to be tackled. The Chief Election Commissioner has not to fold his hand and pray to God for divine inspiration to enable him to exercise his functions and perform his duties, or to look for any external authority for the grant of powers to deal with the situation. He must lawfully exercise his power independently in all matters relating to the conduct of elections, and see that the election process is completed properly in a free and fair manner. The various laws and their sources, the model code, as I mentioned, it has become such a powerful tool in our hands that people have started calling it the moral code. And as I said, since there is no law, no statutory backing, but and some of the provisions cannot be enforced legally, but compliance is total. In fact, those of you who have been following the Indian elections, the last 4 or 5 months ago, we had a running battle between me and the law minister of the country, and some people in the ruling party who wanted a model code to be converted into a statute. We said nothing doing, because the moment it becomes a law, the process is very cumbersome. it will take years for a court case to be decided. And an analogy we like to give, in a cricket match, I don't know how many of you are familiar with cricket, that if there is a no ball, so the umpire has to call a no ball then, so that the next ball is not no ball. Or the LBW decision has to be taken right there and not 7 years later. Then there are laws which they prohibit disharmony, anything which creates conflict between religion, caste, creed, community, and language. No hatred or ill will can be created between communities. You can't use religious institutions for electioneering, and you cannot promote enmity between classes. Then the laws are very elaborate and about preventing bribery of voters, undue influence, impersonation in elections, and anybody making false statement in connection with elections is punishable. Illegal payment and so on and so forth. There are laws for peaceful elections. You can't disturb election meetings, for instance. So voting is totally secret. You can't conduct yourself disorderly in a disorderly manner near a polling station. Public meetings have to end 48 hours before the closing time of the poll. And there are restrictions on pamphlets, posters. For instance, we have disallowed pasting of posters on the walls because this used to cause defacement. And you can't canvass near the polling station. Bribery, dividing society on the basis of caste, creed, etc. Undue influence by using official machinery, giving inducement. All these are legally prohibited. Voting has to be totally voluntary. You cannot force somebody to vote, or you cannot force somebody to abstain from voting. And we take care that dominant communities do not try to intimidate the weaker sections. Then we have a system of constant and credible feedback from various channels. I will not waste your time going over them. Every elector, every voter is free to contest, and all process dealing with nomination is done with the involvement of the candidates. When we are preparing the machines, for instance, electronic voting machines, the machine is opened by the engineers in front of everybody. Every entire testing, sealing of various parts, and final sealing is done in the presence of the candidates all the time. Every candidates are required to file 2 affidavits at the time of filing nomination, giving their financial antecedents and also their criminal antecedents, if there are any criminal cases pending against them. And all these details are put in the public domain. We share them with our civil society. There is a group of civil society, the organization called ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms. It's a conglomerate of 1,200 NGOs. We share all these affidavits with them. They analyze them, and then go to through the media, go to the people and say, look, here is the candidate who has so many rape cases or kidnapping or murder cases pending against. Do you want to vote for him? So it does create consciousness among the people. This is the process of nomination before returning officer. We have to take every possible step to check fraud, and there are enough temptations to commit electoral fraud because stakes are so high. They want to capture power at any cost, and whatever it takes they will do to try and capture elections. And for us, it's the opposite game. We have to make sure that they cannot get away with any of such plan. If you see the last bullet, the ultimate weapon in our hand is countermand in the election. If we feel that despite all our efforts, somebody has committed a fraud on the election process, we countermand the election. And the observers of Indian elections will recall that just 3 months ago, when Rajya Sabha upper house elections were taking place, There were complaints that money had changed hands. We countermanded the election, and which was the first time in 62-year history that we had to countermand an election. And a totally new election with many new candidates took place. We use observers, independent observers from outside the states to ensure that administration behaves. Then security personnel. There are some areas which are prone to all kinds of problems, including militancy, extremism, left-wing extremism in the Maoist areas who every now and then these militants will declare that they will not allow the elections to take place. They will say that the first person who comes to vote, his finger will be chopped off. Nobody would like to be that first person. So, they keep on issuing such threat, and despite that, we have to conduct elections and make sure it's peaceful. Our last general elections were totally peaceful. 11 elections which we conducted, the last one being UP, totally bloodless, totally peaceful. It was amazing. Sometimes we wonder how we were able to pull it off, because there are so many imponderables that we can never be sure what may happen. Then this is the paramilitary force, or the Central Armed Police Force. That is the technical name for them. We don't use army deliberately, but Central Armed Police Force is important, and this also includes armed police force from one state which goes to another state. Now, same Punjab police, which may not be neutral and fair within the state, once it goes to Tamil Nadu or Bengal or Maharashtra, they are fine because they don't know any politician and nobody can influence them. Now, I was telling you about the magnitude of the election, but as I said, we are very sensitive to the very minor detail, and we are sensitive about the right of the last man. And this is an interesting story from the last general election. We conducted the elections in 5 phases. The 5th phase was on 13th of May 2009. And about 100 million voters were to go to poll in that phase. 100 million. But we were worried about just 2 polling stations with 37 voters in Ladakh. And what was the issue? The polling station was at the height of 13,600 feet. There was 4 attempts were made by Indian Air Force helicopter to land the polling party there. They could not land. Now what to do? We cannot have election minus those 2 polling stations. So then we spent more than half the time on these 37 voters than we did on 100 million. How to reach? Then finally we came out with a solution. The only way is to send 2 polling parties on foot. Normally polling party consists of 5. In this case we made it 6 with a person carrying the satellite telephone. And we dispatched them on the 12th. 13th is the poll day. 16th of May is the counting of all phases for the entire country. So 12th whole day they walked. 13th the whole day they walked, they could not reach. 14th they could not reach. 15th they reached at 11:30 and 1:30. These 2 villages are 5 kilometers apart. Finally they reached there. Now the second problem was how to get the results out of them, because they will take 4 days to come back. And counting is to begin on the 16th. Should we wait? If the margin of victory is higher, should we ignore? Now that will be an insult to these voters. There is nothing doing. We have to find a way out. So we came up with a legal innovation that one of the 2 presiding officers were declared assistant returning officer, because law requires that counting has to be done by a returning officer. One polling party went to the other village. In the presence of the village community, the 2 machines were opened and the results were communicated to us on satellite phone. And the first results announced in the country were these 2 polling stations. Now this is the pictures taken by these people, the polling party themselves on the way. As I said, India is a land of diversity. India also is a land of minorities. Every community is a minority in India, somewhere or the other. So, and they can be discriminated against, they could be intimidated, and their interests have to be watched, and we try to do. For instance, we publish the roles of in the language of minorities. So there will be maybe 2 languages, maybe 3 languages. We also ensure that some communities like Muslims, for instance, with their women observe veil. So we have to have women staff in the polling station in those areas. We have separate queues for women, and we also make a special arrangement for voting by people who are displaced in ethnic and communal strife. For instance, for Kashmiri migrants, we have polling outside Kashmir, in Jammu, in Delhi, in the northeast. Sometimes we have these camps outside the state, and we have to make arrangements for the polling. This is a typical queue: Muslims, Hindus, women in veils, and or in all the finery. Then we have provision for weaker sections, like upper caste and lower caste. You're familiar with. In UP, for instance, or in Bihar, it was very common for upper caste to intimidate the lower caste. They will not be allowed to come out of the villages, of their homes, of the clusters, so that they are not able to vote. But that is where we started the concept of vulnerability mapping about 5 years ago, from again UP elections, but 5 years ago, when every single polling station's vulnerability is identified. Who are the people who can threaten a peaceful poll? Who are the guys who can create trouble? Who are the criminals? Their name, their father's name, their history, to the last man. Every district used to have a document this big, and we then would take legal action, preventive action against them. Sometimes even preventive arrests are as provided in the law, or they will be bound down under the law, under the Criminal Procedure Code for good behavior, to make sure that they behave. This has worked wonders for us. People who had not been able to vote for 55, 60 years, they told us that they were able to come very peacefully. Then there are reservations for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Some constituencies are reserved for them, and we also make sure that there is no intimidation of them. Anybody who tries to interfere with their voting rights can be imprisoned. Then we have to ensure confidence building measures like security of all the armed police that you saw. Every time we have election in this state, the first thing which political parties demand is to bring forces from outside and bring that central armed police, because that instills a sense of confidence that local police will not be able to tinker with the election. Similarly, we bring civilian observers from outside. Then we are always improving our process. It's a very dynamic organization. We have started computerization of electoral rolls and photo electoral rolls. Earlier there was no picture of the voter, but we introduced it about 10 years ago. By the way, this 82 is again a little old figure now. It's about 90%. EPIC is the elector's photo identification card or photo ID card, and this also has reached about 90%. In some states it is 100%. Where it is 100% or near 100, we insist that this is the only document they can bring. Similarly, from ballot to the button, it has been a long history. From 1982, we have switched over to electronic voting machines. This was initially tried in Kerala on an experimental basis, and but then it was questioned in the court of law. It went up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that you cannot use electronic voting machine because there is no mention of electronic voting machine in the law. Nothing wrong per se with the machine, the technology, but it has to be mentioned. So therefore the law was passed, and by the time that happened, it was already 90s, and from 98 onward, elections have been held with the EVM. state election, and 2004 was the first general election with EVMs, and after that 2009. This has been a revolutionary development, and we like to call it the wonder machine of democracy. It used to take 2 days, 3 days for a result to be announced, and there will be disputes about every other vote, whether the mark is rightly indicated in the box, or is it crossing a line, or is there a smudge. There used to be real big fights on those. But all that is history. There is no invalid vote anymore. And they have withstood, they have been questioned in various high courts and Supreme Court several times. Even now, there are 2-3 cases are going on. But the courts have always given us a clean sheet. And one court, in fact, called it a pride of India. These are some of the. Now, as I mentioned, transport. Well, while you have a helicopter, you also have a mule, because that's the only way you can reach some places. A boat, or some places can only be reached by walk. We keep innovating. We have now a booth level officer to take the service right to the doorstep. We introduce this system of booth level officer. There may be local teacher, local official who are given this additional charge right in your neighborhood. Go to them anytime, see whether your name is there on the roll. If not, they will give you a form. If there is a mistake, then get it corrected. Collect your card. This has also introduced only 5-7 years ago. It has worked very well. And the fourth bullet, communication tracking. Every single booth, about 1 million of them, we make sure that we have some communication contact with them. We identify at least 2-3 persons who have a telephone or a landline phone or a mobile phone, and if that is not there, where we can reach by satellite phone. When everything else fails, then we spot runners, young able-bodied 2-3 guys who can run to the nearest polling, to the telephone, which may be 2 miles, 3 miles, through the hills. But we must know immediately if anything is happening. This has been a great deterrent, and also it has helped us in some very tricky situations, like in the last election in Maharashtra. A Maoist attack was prevented because of the timely information, and we alerted our Air Force helicopters to take the forces, and those guys ran away. We also use video as a weapon. We are video recording almost everything. Like, for instance, the criminals. We have been demanding that the criminals should be debarred from contesting elections. But till that happens, we cannot allow him to intimidate. So we keep a 24/7 video trail on him. Everything he does is being recorded. He keeps looking over his shoulder, and after some time he realizes that everything is getting recorded, so he behaves. So, and otherwise the public meetings, campaigning. Voter education is one area which was neglected so far, and we have introduced it recently in the last two couple of years. So we created a full-fledged voter education division, because what use is a democracy if people don't come out and vote? Urban apathy was very common. Only 30% voters used to come out and vote. And in fact, it used to be a kind of fashion statement. They didn't come out and to vote, and they would be criticizing the government. So we thought that that's not on. We did the scientific KAPB surveys, knowledge, attitude, behavior and practice surveys, to find out why they behave indifferently, and then we tried to respond to their needs through a very effective communication program. So much so that all the 11 elections which were conducted after setting up of this division 2 years ago recorded highest turnout in history. And in most cases, in fact, except for all cases, women outvoted men. And progress was so dramatic in UP election, for instance, which got completed 3 months ago. There was 30% increase in turnout over the previous election. And women's turnout increased by 45%. It was just revolutionary. And we need to document all these things, how exactly it happened. We need to work on that. We focused on youth and urban voters. We found that only 12 to 14% of our young voters, 18 to 28 group, were getting enrolled. So we launched a very special campaign to reach out to them, and it has now reached about 45%. As a result of our the campaign, this is the increase. For instance, Delhi, these figures you will notice are in percentage points, but if you convert them into percent, for instance, UP, the fourth bullet, 14%, is actually from 42 to 59%. So this is how it was 30%. And everywhere except in Manipur, where it came down a bit, but we are happy that it did, because it had a history of bogus polling. Some of the now, one of the ways to increase youth participation was through a very innovative thing called National Voters' Day. We decided, in a conference of this kind in Bhubaneswar, somebody from the audience got up and said that youth is an age to celebrate, 18 years of voting age. I thought it was a very good statement, and we started thinking, and within a week we came out with what may be the biggest youth empowerment program of the world, National Voters' Day. And what did it do? When you are 18, enrollment, as I mentioned, was only 12% earlier. And normally electoral rolls are notified every year in April, November, July, November, or any time during the year. But we decided, why don't we start identifying them, those who will become 18 on 1st of January, that is the qualifying date, beforehand. This conference I referred to in Bhubaneswar on 25th of September. We had 3 months. We said, let us start looking for them straight away. And 5th of January, across the country, we notified the rolls of a roll. And on 25th of January, in 800,000 functions across the country at the booth level, 800,000 functions, we gave them their voter card. So quick. So, this was, and it was headed by the Prime Minister, by the President in Delhi, in the presence of 35 chief election commissioners of the world. And many of them went back with kind of a takeaway, because this was such a simple device. In fact, when I wrote to the government that I have declared it as a National Voters' Day, and I need your support and cooperation. So it was very naive of me to know that a National Day can be declared by the government. I should have known that. And we went ahead with our preparation a week before the D-Day. We get a reference from the Cabinet Secretary. He said, answer 2 questions before we can declare it as a National Day. 1, whether it will involve a national holiday, and 2, what is the money involved, the funds involved. Our answers were music to the ears. He said, no holiday and no money. We don't need any money, because after all, registration of voters is our normal job. Instead of doing it haphazardly, sporadically, we'll do it on a campaign basis. Instantly, the government in a cabinet resolution declared it a National Day, National Voters' Day for all time. The first National Voters' Day, 18 million people got their voter card, and of which 5.2 million were just 18 to 19. Second National Voters' Day, 8 months ago, this year, it went up to 38 million people getting their voter ID card, of which 11 million were just 18. Now these are some shots of youth power. Then we do lots of things to make it easy for the voters. I'll not go into all that. We are also, as I mentioned, sensitive to women. One of the reasons why women came out in large numbers, 2 reasons. One, our confidence building measures. Because women are the first victim of any violence. So there used to be violence around the polling station. There will be bomb blasts, there will be gunshot, there will be all kinds of rowdyism. So who would like to come and vote in such circumstances? So the presence of the armed police all around, make sure that they feel comfortable. Secondly, then we also decided that the queues for women will move faster. For every man who is allowed to enter the polling booth, 2 women were allowed. With the result that the women's queues were very, very small, And the kind of participation activity that we did, there was 115-kilometer human chain. In one full stadium, there was Rangoli. You know, Rangoli is a decoration with flowers, which women do on a festive occasion. So they decorated the entire stadium. They really made it their movement. And they came up with very interesting slogans, telling their husband that today is your day to make breakfast because I'm going to go and vote. You go and make breakfast for the family. And it was very well. And as I said, 45% increase in UP alone. But that's too dramatic. It is not the case in all the states. But rise all the same. We are also sensitive to the disabled people. Every polling station must have a ramp. Every machine has a braille facility, and infirm can also take a companion with them. Now these sites are very common. You know, there's a modern means of transport. There's a woman being taken on a cot, and you know these are very common scenes in Indian election. Then the fact that we use a symbol along with the name of the candidate is to make it illiterate friendly. That has been the thing from the beginning. Multilingual roll, multilingual ballot paper, and in fact recently to make it inclusive, we even included transgenders in the polling process, because earlier unless they identified their gender very clearly, they were not enrolled. So we received a representation, and we have very quick decision making. We decided to create another gender. There's a male or a female. There is a third gender called other, and about 1 million such people got empowered. There was celebration in their colonies, and after that, the census also adopted this from us. That this is it's a simple device. Why not? Then money in the election is a big issue, and we have to control money power. So second new division which we created in Election Commission was Expenditure Monitoring Division, where we brought its Income Tax Commissioner, and we came up with a guideline, and which we enforced very strictly. 73 crores were seized in Tamil Nadu in the election. Dr. Pradeep, 73 crores will be how many $1 million? Divided by 5, $12 million. We see that much of money. Our money control measures were very, very powerful. We also use all kinds of technology, except in a voting machine, where deliberately, by a conscious decision, we use a 17th century technology of a basic calculator, not a sophisticated computer, deliberately.
Could you talk a little bit about the live webcasting? I think some.
Yeah. You know, as I mentioned, we keep on innovating. The lady collector in Arunachal, which is on China border, where it takes about 3 days for a polling party to reach polling station, so we would not know if there is a booth capturing or what is happening. So she came up with a simple device. It sounds very simple now to us. That with a laptop, she set up live webcasting from some polling stations. We were able to see what was happening in those polling stations sitting in Delhi. In one shot, we saw one constable in his uniform entering a polling station, polling booth. So immediately we called up the concerned officer to find out what was happening. It was an innocent entry, but the fact that he violated the rule, we were able to see for ourselves. Now we have made it armed with the success. We made it compulsory to webcast from every station, but we realized it was not really necessary from all places. Only now a fair percentage, say 5 to 10% booths, which are remote, where the possibility of mischief can be there, and there is no regular flow of security people. So it is working extremely well. We are also moving towards biometric identification technology. We used the biometric system in Goa elections 3 months ago for the first time. It worked very well, and we are moving in that direction. I think one of the last 2 or 3 slides, The fact that with this kind of experience, the world is looking at India, and there are so many countries want to learn from our experience. So we have started opening our doors. Earlier we were just confined to ourselves, and we have 12, 13 countries already with an MOU with us. We set up this institute, training institute for election management, India International Institute of Election Management. The basic purpose is to train our own 11 million people, by the way. But maybe 500 to 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people from other countries. So already 15, 16 countries have already got their training in the last 1 year alone. We started in improvised arrangement. Pradeep was in Delhi in that institute. He also did a course for us. Very nice 3-day program he organized for us, for which we are really grateful. And it has become a hub of sharing of democratic practices worldwide. Many international organizations and others are also coming on board. We were very closed about them earlier, but we have opened our doors. Well, the last two slides, our strengths and opportunities, our constitutional mandate, our independence, our credibility, total support of judiciary, public and the media, our power over the field machinery, very quick decision making and 100% compliance of the politicians, and innovation and experience are our strengths. But still we have some challenges. The money power is yet to be fully controlled. Urban and youth apathy is being addressed very effectively. We know we are on the right track. 1 or 2 more years and we would have reached everybody. And challenges of security, because there have to be local variation, local innovation. For instance, to give you one example, very often we are asked this question: why do you prolong the elections? 7 phases, 5 phases, 6 phases, why? So, but this was a question which was asked me by the former president of India, Mr. Kalam. Why can't you do it in 1 day? We said we can do it in 1 day, provided we have enough security. So, depending on the available security, we do it in the phases, because that is the first expectation of the people. When we went to Bihar, Mr. Nitish Kumar, he demanded in Bihar, he said, I don't care if you do it in 10 phases, but I want your central armed police to be in every police station. Now the politicians, people have accepted this as a very desirable thing, because no price is too much to pay for a free and fair and peaceful election. As I was mentioning to you, when we did the elections in Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, they are the same size states. West Bengal we did in 7 phases, with Tamil Nadu in 1 day, because their requirement was different. In Tamil Nadu we were dealing with money power. In West Bengal we were dealing with the gun power. There used to be political murder, so it has to be. Then we keep improving, we have to improve facilitation more. Whether we should reduce polling duration is one challenge. And of course, we want reforms which are in our hands, we keep doing all the time. But reforms which require parliament, they are pending with the government, some of them for 18 to 20 years. But to be fair to the government, I would like to say that this government has been responsive to the extent that the Union Law Minister, Mr. Moily, came to Election Commission to discuss those proposals. He spent 3.5 years to discuss those reform proposals. He did not expect it. We did not expect the meeting to be so long. And then we decided that jointly with him, Law Ministry and Election Commission, we will conduct 7 regional consultations all over the country, which we did to build up a consensus. And then last one, the 8th one, was to be a national level consultation, where we had taken the date from the Prime Minister. 2nd of July 2011 was the date fixed. That happened to be the World Cup cricket final, and Indians are very crazy about. We won that championship, by the way. Then it was postponed to 2nd of July. 2nd of July was the peak of Anna Hazare movement, and Anna was at Jantar Mantar. So that was not the best time for this activity, so it got postponed a second time. It has not happened again. But that was the second time when Law Minister came to discuss the arrangement for the national consultation. When he was replaced by Mr. Khurshid, I mentioned to him and I wrote to him all that had happened before him and requested him to follow it up. He came, it's the third visit of a law minister in 10 months, to assure us that he will bring it up very soon. So, of course, later on it was the Lokpal bill which kept the parliament busy, and somehow it has not happened. But I'm a born optimist. I still feel that the government is very serious, and probably they'll bring up the bill. We have peaceful, at the end, we have peaceful, orderly, democratic transfer of power. Every transfer of power has been peaceful in the country. We have never ever missed a deadline by a single day, even in the worst of circumstances. Total credibility of the election process. People have never questioned the verdict, and the India's democracy has been reinforced. And our vision, which we formulated at the time of Diamond Jubilee celebration, that we must have elections that are completely free of crime, which they are not currently, by the way, and abuse of money, based on a perfect electoral roll and with full participation of voters. Full participation of voters is still shaping up, but response has been enormous. Thank you. Yeah, this is the picture of a last president of India at the polling station. She is showing her card because she has to prove her identity. Nobody will believe she is the president of India. And after as a voter, her finger has to be marked, and she also shows the finger to the media. That is the beauty. And if you don't notice, the election staff, she is not overawed by the president of India. She is there like anybody else. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You can moderate.
Okay. You can take your own questions and we can help.
Yes, sure. Yes, I see a hand at the back.
So the no acceptable candidate option is an important option for voters who doesn't, who wants to exercise their right, but doesn't like any candidate.
Yeah.
Last time I voted, but it was the last election, it was only exercised in a paper format where I could just sign,
Yeah.
but it wasn't in the EVM.
Yeah.
Is there any movement to?
Yes, we about 11 years ago we wrote to the government to bring up this reform through the act, that a button should be allowed at the machine, at the end of the machine, none of the above. But the government it's lying with the government with so many other reform proposals. But incidentally, let me make it clear, but this is not in the same spirit as Anna Hazare and his group was demanding. It is not with the intention of right to reject. I reject all of them, none of the above, I reject all of them. But if that is not the case, then why are we recommending it? We are recommending it because of your security. Because the secrecy of the ballot is important. Why should anybody know that you have not voted? Because once you go and initially in the act, you used to go and announce, look, I'm not planning to vote. So they'll give you a form, and then that form will be kept in an envelope. But by then everybody knows that you have not voted. So that will be a threat to you from the candidate. Secondly, secondly, we would not like that somebody else goes and vote. You are not planning to vote. Somebody else will go and cast your vote. So to guard against that, we have asked for it, but not with the intention of right to reject.
Just as a comment, I wanted to say that the wisdom of the way in which this electoral commission was set up in India is cast into very high relief against what goes on in our country, in the US, of politicized voting rules which try to exclude voters from participation in the democracy. So maybe you can get the US to come over and take some lessons from you as well. I don't know if you know what's going on in this country, but several states have put in laws that try to exclude minority voters, poor voters, in this coming presidential election.
So really,
we could take
to know that. I'd like to know more about it.
Well, Bob, I think one can say that is not what these laws do. These laws are an attempt to provide exactly what India already has, a voter ID card. And it seems to me there's a very big difference in excluding groups and requiring everybody to have a photo ID, which it would seem works in India, and so might work here. Exclusion is not a matter of law; it's a matter of intimidation.
It's the intention.
Yeah, intimidation.
No question of intimidation.
Yes, quite right.
prevent prevention of fraud, which is a
Yeah.
very negligible issue in this
Right.
country.
It's a
In
negative.
any case, which is, I think, inclusion is the key word in our entire process. Everyone must use the right with full freedom. Yes, sorry, madam. Yeah.
In continuation with what, with what you were mentioning, like we have, many of the candidates who are standing for elections, and if we find that they are not good, and if majority of the population, and suppose that we have this option coming up where it says, okay, none of the above. I mean, what action, is there any response which could be taken? The majority of the people feel that none of the candidates are good enough. So what can be done after that?
This demand somehow has been circulated by knowledgeable people. To my mind, it is a waste of energy, waste of time. Legally, the situation is that if 1,000 people vote and 999 say none of the above, and one person says Pradeep Chabad, for us he is the winner,
Yes.
because that's the only valid vote. All others are, this is the equivalent of a blank. Earlier what used to happen was, you will fold your ballot paper blank. Nobody would know whether you have really voted. You will go behind the counter, you will pretend that you put a stamp, but you will just fold it and put it in the box. So, and when it is opened, it is blank, so it is invalid vote. Or what they would do, they'll put a stamp in 2-3 places, so that it becomes invalid. And worse used to be, they would write all of them are thieves, sab chore hai. So that, now none of the above in this case becomes only the not expressing your opinion. That becomes a blank vote. So now if 919 people did that and the vote goes waste, they are wasting their energy. If that energy was used to support a good candidate, surely there will be some good candidate. Then when Anna Hazare came to meet me and along with his team, the team came to us, and Prashant Bhushan, his father, the two eminent lawyers, Justice Hegde, and we raised this question. He said, look, we do not accept your right to reject in the context of none of the above, because there will be, the devil is in the detail. Then the question will be, there may be in the list of 20 candidates, there may be innocent candidates also. And they will say, what have we done to deserve to be disqualified? Because when you say none of the above, it doesn't mean that a month later when the next election takes place, the same people come up again. It will mean that the whole panel will be disqualified and new set of candidates. So it will be very unfair. You are talking of none of the above and these are criminals in the context of top 2-3 candidates. But there are 20, 30, 40 others. So we should put up a good candidate. Evan Matam.
Let me first thank you for an incredibly informative and interesting talk. I knew generally that the Election Commission in India was unusual and extremely strong, but I had no idea how strong it was. And I'm just struck by some of the laws that you enforce are colonial era laws. They're left from the time when the British were trying to keep law and order. I think the ones that have to do with fomenting religious anxiety and so forth. But I wonder if the kind of is probably the word authoritarian is misplaced, but you know what I mean. Those kinds of singular powers strike me as very unusual. I mean, I think in this country there would be litigation at every other moment. If you had a separate line that privileged women, somebody would regard that as unfair and unequal practice. There would just be lawsuit after lawsuit, and obviously it is working in a remarkably constructive way here. But I guess my question, and I'm just intrigued by it, is how much would be transferable? Clearly some of it is from these people who are now coming to you, but I would think that the whole situation where you are put into such a fascinatingly unusual situation vis-a-vis the courts, vis-a-vis the military and so forth, is something that perhaps very few other countries could replicate.
You're quite right. But the reference to colonial laws is heard every now and then, but the fact is that the theft was an offense 2000 years ago, so it is an offense now. Most of these things are common sense. The fact that laws have been amended, the fact that the constitution has been amended, by and large, all those laws are working very well. So it's not that we are a police state at all.
No, of course.
We have very strong, very powerful judiciary. In fact, some people think that too powerful, too active judiciary. We have very powerful media. We have, I think our media is freer than probably American media. So in that situation, there is no possibility of any abuse of these authoritarian, what you call authoritarian laws. But at the same time, the fact that there used to be intimidation, the fact that there are criminals around, and they have to be tamed, and it is virtually 30 days of emergency that we impose, but people love it, let me tell you. There used to be headlines in every election, if you see, there will be people wishing that, hoping that the election Raj continues. Because that is the time when, there is discipline. There will be no defacement, there will be no loudspeaker. Some people criticize us for killing the festival of democracy. One TV anchor, very famous TV anchor, also writes a column. She wrote criticizing us for killing the festival of democracy. I wrote an counter article in the same papers, and I said, please send me your address. I'll send the festival to your house. Somebody will paint your walls. Somebody will put up posters. They will also have all the blaring loudspeakers playing. So if that is the festival, people love it. If you like after Tamil Nadu elections, I remember Hindu for 1 week letters to the editor. The entire thing was about people appreciating, praising election commission. Oh, very peaceful election. And the fact that there is 30% increase in voter turnout, that is the real festival. If we had killed the festival, the turnout should come down. What we have removed is the nuisance part of it. We have made it very, very orderly. And it's working pretty well.
First, I wanted to echo Professor Metcalf and thanks for an incredibly stimulating talk. My question is about biometrics in the future. But before I do that, a quick comment, because you ended with a slide about youth apathy, but people have brought up Hazare's right to reject, which some critique as actually very anti-democratic. It's very debated. But so I'm interested at some point in the conversation between the figure of apathy and then the critique or cynical question of Hazare. But my question is, you mentioned biometrics, and so here's two versions. I'm interested in particular in the future of the Universal ID Authority of India, the Aadhaar card. And some have argued that Aadhaar will become a universal single platform. And so one question is there a chance in the future you think that the voter ID card and its biometric will ever be folded into or not, just as an open question?
Yeah.
And the impact of that, if so or if not. The converse question is not so much about how Aadhaar may affect elections, but vice versa. So one of the questions in the last year around Aadhaar has been, does it have any statutory right to exist? But the model code has no statutory right to exist. So I'm interested, is the model code itself a model for the future of Aadhaar?
Yeah. So 2-3 points. Now, biometrics, it is going to be adopted gradually. Already, you must have heard of Aadhaar, the unique identification.
Yeah.
So when they started, Nandan Nilekani came to Election Commission. He's just started, whereas we have been in business for so long. We have 700 million people already carrying the card. And instead of we duplicating the same thing, after they got everybody's fingerprints, we'll also tag along and we will use those. So although the current situation is that they are refusing to share that with others, there are two authorities that are now collecting biometrics, but we'll move in that direction. But while we'll be using all kinds of technology, we are not looking at in the near future, foreseeable future, distance voting, internet voting, because some people say that that's the only way for youth to participate. Look, poll day is a national holiday. You're given a free paid holiday, and if you cannot take the trouble to come out and vote and say that, what convenience are they talking about? That is one. The other is that we are bothered about this voter security and also voters' integrity. We cannot protect you if somebody comes with a gun to your house, you're sitting on a laptop, vote for me. How will you protect you? It's not possible. Secondly, we don't even trust you. Somebody comes to you with an envelope of 5,000 rupees, you vote for me. We cannot guard against that in your home. So that's why we are not looking at internet voting, although technologically for India it's a child's play. You know, India in IT is quite a power. But we, by conscious decision, we are not looking at that. We expect people to come to the polling station.